Hey, everybody, welcome to Live from the Ranch. My name is Ken Ramirez, and a very good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you, depending upon where in the world you're joining us from. I'm excited about our broadcast today, and joining me as my co-host, as she does every month, is Juliana DeWillems of JW Dog Training and Behavior in the Washington, D.C. area. Hey, Juliana, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm enjoying that summer's kind of starting to be behind us, cooler temps, back to a routine. So I'm great.
Yeah, it's nice. Same thing happening here in Washington. We're having nice weather, still summer-like, but a
Yeah.
little bit cooler, and that makes it really enjoyable for people, I think. So, you got some things coming up. I saw on Instagram that you're doing moderating a book discussion at a book. Tell us a little bit about it. You're going to be moderating like Alexandra Horowitz and a few other authors, correct?
Yes, thank you for asking. This Saturday is the Library of Congress's National Book Festival. It's the 25th year they're doing it, I guess. And yes, I was invited to moderate a panel of authors who have all written about dogs. It's Alexandra Horowitz, who I think many of us are familiar with her book. That's like right up our science alley. Elias Friedman, who a lot of people know as the doggist on Instagram. He takes pictures of dogs. He's very popular. And then somebody named Mark Rowlands, who's more of a philosopher and looks at dogs. So it's a really interesting crowd. And while I've moderated panels for Clicker Expo where I know the subject matter, obviously I know dogs, but it's interesting. This will be my first time talking to authors and making sure that I'm running the conversation about both their books and the topic of dogs and making sure it's something everyone can enjoy. So it'll be a learning experience for me.
I think it'll be a lot of fun. You probably remember when Alexandra Horowitz was on our
Yes.
program. She's very giving and very easy
Yeah.
to talk to, and very accessible in a lot of ways. And I don't know the other two authors, but I think you'll do a great job. I think you're excellent at asking questions and probing a little deeper into things. So I think it
Thank
ought to be fun.
you.
So have a lot of fun at that this weekend.
Thank you. And it's not streamed, but I do believe it's going to be recorded afterwards because obviously it's in Washington, D.C., but I know people watching this broadcast are from everywhere. So if anybody's interested, I will be sharing the link on my Instagram afterwards and it'll be available online, which is cool.
Excellent. Well, one of the things I want to remind all of our viewers as we get into our meeting our guest today, I want to make sure that you remember that you can write questions for our guest. Anything that we talk about that you want to know more about, just put it in the chat window, whether you're on Facebook or you're on YouTube. Uh, Juliana will be paying attention to that, and she'll make sure that those questions are brought to the forefront so that we can get to that as we have our discussion today. And Juliana, I'm excited about our guest today because Liza is somebody that I don't know well. I've not actually met her other than over the internet, and so I'm going to probably find out a lot of new things about them as we have that discussion today. So let's jump right into it. Let me tell everybody just a little bit about our guest, Liza Rader. They are a KPA CTP, and they specialize in sporting gun dog breeds. They're a second generation Nova Scotia duck tolling retriever trainer, and they're a retrieving enthusiast. Liza is the owner and operator of Focus Dog Training on the south coast of British Columbia and works with guardians of dogs who are described as out of control, hyperactive, toy obsessed, or just too much. I think we all understand those descriptions. With a background in the arts and humanities, Liza uses creative problem solving to find real solutions for complex behavior cases. They prioritize both canine and human welfare throughout all of their work and enjoy finding reinforcement-based ways of training traditional hunting and retrieving skills. A big believer in finding exercises and enrichment activities that are both fulfilling for the dog and accessible for the guardian, Liza uses retrieving skills to create fun, customizable games. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation this afternoon. Hey, Liza, come on, and welcome so much to Live from the Ranch. How are you?
Good. How are you, Ken?
I am doing very, very well. Since this is your first time with us on Live from the Ranch, I'm sure some of our viewers would love to know a little bit about your background, especially when and where along your career or in your childhood, or when was it that you got interested in dogs, and when did you become interested, and what prompted you to take an interest in training of dogs?
So I've been like in dogs, as we kind of put it, my whole life. My grandmother was a international sporting breed judge, a breeder of Nova Scotia Dutch Golden Retrievers for 36 years, and also was the president of the Toller Club here in Canada. And when I was about 10, she really decided that that's what I was going to do too, and it kind of worked. So I really grew up in and around whelping boxes, crawling into crates with dogs, kind of stuff you're not really supposed to do, but they let me get away with it because they're gems. I spent a lot of time just like running around in the woods with a pack of duck tollers and just having a great time. And so the love of them just as a little family, but also just dogs in general, I kind of didn't have an option on that when it came installed. And she was really amazing. She really took me under her wing when I was, about like 10, 11, started taking me to dog shows, put me in junior handling. And I really got to learn sort of all about raising puppies and caring for senior dogs and training and showing and traveling. We traveled back and forth across Canada a couple of times. And I still have that same family of dogs, which is very cool. The way that I was taught to train was very old school, compulsive gun dog obedience training. That's what I learned for a really long time. And it wasn't until I was in university, I didn't have a dog for the first and only time ever. It was very distressing. I had my little cat Kurt, and I found Kiko Pup on YouTube, and I went, oh, that's cool. I really like that. And so I got my first clicker and I started training Kurt. That was like, almost 15 years ago. He just passed away a couple of weeks ago. He was my KPA second species as well, which is really cool. And he was my first clicker training partner. And I taught him things like giving high fives and jumping over jumps. And he had a really great recall, like all sorts of cool stuff. And then since then, I've just sort of gone further and further off the deep end with training, first just as a hobby, and then sort of accidentally kind of ended up training professionally. And now here we are.
Well, that's really great. And I loved that explains one of the questions I was going to ask you is in your introduction, I explained that you were a second generation dog person. And I wondered what you meant by that, but now I understand. And I also find it interesting. I think I'm going to enjoy this conversation because we have something that we have very much in common. And then there's another thing which I know very little about. And the thing that we have in common is that we both started in more traditional training and transitioned to positive reinforcement, which can be difficult for some people. And then the second thing is gun dog activities. It's not something that I've done anything with. I'm not familiar with a lot of the gun dog obedience routines or things that people generally do with them. So some of my questions may be very, very basic, but I'm really curious about that. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about with you throughout this episode is the whole idea of retrieving. Clearly, for a lot of gun dogs, people often use retrievers as gun dogs. And tell me a little bit about the retrieval procedure itself when it comes to the sport of using guns and dogs with gun dogs. Tell me a little bit about it so that I get a better picture of the way the dogs are utilized, whether it be for retrieving or anything else. Are they flushing out the game? Tell me a little bit more about the use of those dogs.
Yeah, so gun dogs are really interesting because they're one of our newest, youngest groups of working dogs. You kind of can't have gun dogs if you don't have guns, so they post-date guns. But we did have a lot of dogs who hunted birds with us before guns, and we see that lineage in breeds like the Toller and like the Quaker Hun, where one of the ways we did that is we would use little lure dogs to entice the dogs up a little stream that had progressively smaller and smaller netting until we could catch the bird itself. That's sort of one way that we hunted waterfowl before we had easily accessible and easily like reloadable guns. Tollers are weird. They do pull ducks. You get it accidentally all the time if you have a good toller, and all of a sudden you'll be playing with them, and then there's a whole bunch of birds looking at you on the side of the shore. We don't really know what exactly is really interesting with them, but the birds do find them very interesting. The variety of ways that we work with dogs to hunt birds is pretty vast. So you have your really traditional upland game hunting dogs who there's incredible videos of them working up in like the Highlands of Scotland, your setters, your pointers, where they're working very, very sort of almost stereotypic behavior, creeping along, hunting and searching for birds, and then freezing and waiting for that to be, there's a variety of ways we could do that. We can flush them, we can beat them out, like it's a whole thing. There's also beating with spaniels, another whole different thing. Really traditional retrieving with retrievers is the dog sits and waits in the blind with the handler. And when the bird is shot, the dog is released on cue, and they go to either where they saw it fall or where they're directed to go. And they pick it up and they bring it back in as straight a line and as fast as possible. And of course, that's going to vary so much with the terrain. And there's a lot to kind of nerd out on about like the kinds of specific terrain and also who the hunters were that shaped different breeds like Chessies versus golden retrievers, right? But that's the kind of core.
And when and where and how did positive reinforcement come into the use of into training with gun dogs? Because I know that traditionally it wasn't done that way. When did it come into play? You explain when you started exploring positive reinforcement, but I've recently seen more and more gun dog trainers talking about using positive reinforcement when that wasn't the case 30 or 40 years ago. Where did that transition come from, or do you know how that transition happened?
It's complicated and different depending on where you live. So I would say, like, I feel especially in the UK and in Europe, like mainland Europe, there is a really robust and nuanced understanding of positive reinforcement in traditional gun dog trainers. They just wouldn't call it that.
I see.
And there is a very big cultural difference in the way that retrieving training is taught, even in traditional training in North America versus the UK, and then it's different even again in Europe. And to the point that it's actually changed the behavior of the puppies. Like, it's the difference in natural retrieving ability between English bred field line labs and American field line labs is really interesting, because we do rely much more on force fetch in North America. It's just a cultural thing. And that has just over the years changed the dogs that we work with, which is fascinating. But more and more you've started to see people going like, maybe we don't need to like put an e-collar on the dog's stomach, theoretically. Like, maybe was there a different way to do this? And there's started to be like little bits of pockets of people very kind of quietly doing their own thing and trying to figure things out. And then we've started to get more things like Joe Lauren's Force-Free Gun Dog book. There's a few people in the United States who are just starting to kind of trying to learn as much as we can from traditional trainers and figure out the things that do work, why do they work? And the things that we think are like, yeah, that doesn't sit well with me. How could I do that a little bit differently? And try to find new ways of working with those kind of things that are maybe a little icky for us. And so it's been a real slow process, but I think a lot of us have been kind of quietly trying to figure things out, and now it's rising to the surface a little bit more.
That's really cool. Now, one of the things that's interesting, I think, is when we talk about something like a retrieval, you teach a lot about retrieval, and you don't teach about retrievals just in the context of gun dog sports. You talk about retrievals of many, 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 many different kinds. How is there a big difference between what a gun dog needs to do when retrieving a bird, for example, as opposed to a service dog handler who needs their dog to retrieve a dropped item that they dropped out off their wheelchair or something? Is the process for training the same, or do you approach it very differently because of the context?
So at its core, a retrieve is actually incredibly simple. It's very straightforward. You wait until a cue, whatever that cue may be, and then you pick the thing up and then you put it where it's supposed to be. So at that, in that kind of thing, it's the same. So it's the same in the obedience ring. It's the same in a hunt test. It's the same if we're hunting geese, and it's the same, in a Starbucks if I drop my wallet.
Okay.
Right. But where we get really, really different is, am I raising a puppy who is designed to do this and came out of the box, wanting to pick things up and carry them around, and the goal is to put a master hunter on him, versus a dog who maybe was not designed to do that, and now I want to teach them to pick up my keys for me, and that's a really technically challenging thing for them to handle.
Right.
And maybe they're 10 months old or 2 years old. So the way we might go about things with a very green baby dog who already kind of does most of the work for you, they already want to get it and bring it back and share it, it's going to look different than a dog who doesn't have all of that already, but at its core it's still kind of the same thing.
All right. That's interesting. I'm looking forward to, I know that what we're going to try to do, just so everybody knows, in this broadcast, Liza has their dog, Biscuit, and we're going to do some demos and talk a little bit about how we begin the process of training a solid retrieve. But I thought it might be interesting for people to see you working with Biscuit in the field, and we can just show a video of the marked retrieve, and then I'll ask you some questions about it after we watch it. Does that sound good, Liza?
Sounds great.
All right, let's watch that first video, and we'll talk about it after it shows. So just curious, where did Biscuit go after she brought the item back? She went behind you. Did you toss a reinforcer back there, or was there something else going on?
Yeah, I chucked a piece of food for him. He's got such a big chase motivation that I can make very boring food very exciting just by tossing it. And for him, he was kind of going, that's kind of a straightforward retrieve, Mom. Like,
that was easy.
Oh, easy. I'm like, yeah, come on. I make it worth your while. You get to chase something and do something exciting. So,
but I think that's an interesting point as well, is that sometimes it may not be the quality of the reinforcer, the actual reinforcer, as much as the quality of how it's delivered that makes a difference to a learner. And because I'm not really familiar with that breed of dog, I just want to verify that Biscuit is a Nova Scotia duck holding retriever. Is that correct?
He sure is, yeah.
Okay, and he's a would most people who know that breed look at him and immediately know that's the breed that he is?
Absolutely, yeah.
That's what I thought. That's great. Love that. I love the reliability of your retrieves. And so what I'd love to do is let's take just a short little commercial break if we can. And while we're doing that, I'll let you set up with Biscuit, and we'll talk a little bit about how you begin the process, and maybe you can show us some stuff with Biscuit here live on the ranch. That's why we're called that. All right. We'll be right back with Liza, but I do want to talk a little bit about the fact that we are in the month of September right now. And for us, that is back to school month. And it's our biggest sale of the season, and it's happening right now. You can head over to our website to learn how you can save up to 20% on our on-demand courses and training essentials, including treats, clickers, books, and streaming videos. So stock up now, and all you got to do is visit clickertraining.com. And so that's all I had to say about that. I was just kind of moving slow to make sure that Liza had the opportunity to move to their other training space. And there they are.
Here we go. We're in the training space.
All right. So
I've got Biscuit here.
All right. So when you first start, I know Biscuit's already obviously a very well-trained retriever, but talk us a little bit through the way you begin the retrieve process and how you teach that. Where do you start? Do you start? Do you back chain it, or what approach do you usually take?
I back chain it, and there's a ton of reasons. So like I've done most of the ways that you can train a retrieve. Like I have done forced fetches, but I've also, just because I'm a nerd, have taken like everybody's retrieve class ever. And I also do a lot of behavior work with dogs whose retrieve has fallen apart. So the dog who like got kicked out of gun dog club because they shredded a bird and then tried to bite someone, they took it away, or the dog who just refuses to pick anything up anymore. And this is a way that I have found that fills in a lot of foundational learning gaps before we run into a problem. And the biggest goal that I have is that whenever the dog has something, I want them to know what to do with it. So
Right.
what is the next step? So they never have that moment of like, oh no, what I'm not supposed to put this down, but I don't know what to do. And with the back chain retrieve, we're always working towards putting it in my hand.
Gotcha.
And so they're always working towards that goal.
What I want to do is I'm gonna let you take over the screen here in a second and show us some of those beginning steps, and I can still talk to you and ask you questions. But I wanted to remind our viewers, not only do I want you to write in if you have questions for Liza about retrieving, but I'd also like you to love to hear about unique ways that you've used a retrieval. If you have those, put those in the comments, just because we'd love to see them. And if you've ever had a retrieval break down on you, tell us why it broke down or what the challenge was, because I think often hearing about the different ways people experience challenges can be really, really beneficial to us, and it'll give us something to talk about as well. So if you have unique ways of using retrieves, put it in the comments, or if you have challenges that you've experienced with retrievals, put those in the comments as well, and it might prompt us to talk about that. But in the meantime, Liza, tell us a little bit about how you get started in the process.
So I get started, I use something like this. The lighting will be better once we move, I promise. And I always start with something that I don't care about. So if we mess it up, like who cares, right? You can just try a different thing. And I really like these kind of bone-shaped toys because one of the things we care about is that they pick it up nice and cleanly and they don't chatter their mouth all over it and they don't bite down hard. And just by nature of the weight of these and the shape, they kind of teach themselves to pick it up nice and cleanly and calmly in the middle. And so if they're going to pick it up at this some point and it's going to go badly and they're going to readjust, we're like, oh, I got to pick it up in the middle. And then they're fine. Yes, this is for you. You are going to get to do work. And we start with just, can you sniff it? Can you touch it? Biscuit will not oblige us by doing those early steps. He will go right to grabbing it, but we start with wherever they need us to start, right? If that's just sniffing it, cool.
All right. So if you do have a dog that isn't interested in putting his mouth around it, how do you begin that process? How do you teach them to open their mouth and put something in their mouth if it doesn't seem to come naturally to them?
So one of the things that I like about, I use these little West Paw toys because they are really nice texture and the dogs seem to really like to chew them. So it's a nice, smooth, it's just enough sort of give that they kind of want to put it in their mouth. So it already is setting us up for success. If we're getting like just nose targeting, nothing else, I've got a lot of tricks up my sleeve. The first one that I do is I just go to capturing for a couple of days. So anytime I hand them anything, if it's a cookie, if it's a toy, whatever it might be, as soon as they take it, I mark and I give them something better. And I just leave them at that until they're sort of going like, oh, hey, I better grab stuff, right? And then I might just really casually, I'm not going to do it because you're being very good. Offer it to the dog and they start to grab it, I'm going to immediately click that, right? So even if it's just, we're not even taking it yet, any kind of mouth action at all. Sometimes even if we just click like a little bit of like a teeth chatter near it or a jaw like adjustment, they'll start to pick that up. If we're really stuck though, then what I do is I go to a food item. So I'll use something like a collagen chew or a bully stick, kind of the lowest value chew that I think they'll take. And I make sure I have something much higher value than that. So I'm going to use a bully stick. I'm going to have like cooked steak and I'm going to offer them that. And as soon as I go to take it, I'm going to mark and I'm going to give them like 4 or 5 pieces of that really amazing cookie. So they're going like, oh, this is a good idea. I better do that. So that one I go to last if we've exhausted all our other ones, because we can build in a little bit of conflict accidentally if we're not really careful. But we've got a lot of tricks up our sleeves to try to get them over that initial hump. But it is a common place where they get stuck for sure.
Excellent. That's cool. And then once you've got them taking it from you, I assume you take it back so that they are learning to drop. Do you teach them to drop it in your hand or to drop it on the ground or?
it is a while until I let them have any kind of possession over it. So they've got a lot of steps before they get to take it away from me. And that is for a couple of reasons. One, I'm going to get either a drop, which I don't want them to practice, or they're going to be like, sweet, this is awesome. And they're going to go away and now I have a problem. So until they're really understanding that concept of like, oh, I need to get it somewhere. There's something to do with this to get reinforcement. It's not just that I have this thing now, that I don't let them take it until they're doing a thing to get food with the retrieve item.
Gotcha. Excellent. Can you give us a demonstration of, I realize you can't do the beginning part, but I'd love to see Biscuit working with it where you're doing whatever the lowest, the simplest.
The lowest that he'll get to see. Are you willing to cooperate today? Gonna do the biscuit show? All right, my dear. I always start sitting with this so that I'm not leaning into his face. Good. That's nice. And I'm getting that nice still mouth. Once I'm getting just a mouth contact, I don't worry about duration yet. I'm just going to lower it and click as he brings his head up.
And I assume that's because the most important thing right now is giving it to you, is bringing it to
Yeah,
you.
if I ask for duration now, I'm going to get a lot of throwing it at me and spitting it out and sort of like teeth chattering because they're not sure yet. They're not clear. One of the things that I do, I think that's a little different than a lot of retrieve programs is I train the retrieve the hold rather, very late in the game. A lot of retrieve programs start with it at the beginning, but it's really boring. And they tend to do a lot of messing around with it instead of what I want. And then we get the lift, good job. And then we kind of just continue to lower it until it's all the way on the ground. And only once he can lift fully from the ground with support am I going to ask him to bring it up himself.
And is there any point in this process where you're worried about or looking at the strength of the bite? In other words, if they're biting on it really hard, is that something you're trying to avoid? Are you looking for the soft hold? And how do you shape for that?
We would love a really soft hold. Right now, I don't worry about it. Most of the kind of chomping and stuff like that tends to come out in the wash. And a lot of it is also an issue of just overexcitement and arousal and stress. And so I find when we are very, very clear about our criteria and we're maintaining really high level of criteria at each little baby step that we do, we tend to get a lot less of the chomping and chattering. Later on, if I'm still getting a lot, that's when that's when I will teach a hold. And then I do, this is a really traditional gun dog thing. I'll have them hold a plastic water bottle and we just mark and reinforce for holding it without making any noise. Plastic.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. And so you said, as you said, I love the fact that you don't actually teach the actual retrieve, the bring it to you till much later in the game. So what are the things that you're focusing on? You talked about bringing it right to you, lifting it up and giving it to you, letting go of it. Are there other criteria that are important to you during these early stages of the grab and release?
The thing that I want to see is that they are picking it up cleanly, so they're not sort of pushing it along the ground or fumbling it. And so I'm just staying at each little teeny tiny baby step long enough for them to be comfortable and confident with what they're doing. A thing that we sometimes get that is a non-issue is lifting up and back instead of up and towards me. Again, that's the kind of thing that comes out in the wash. But that I always kind of, one of the things I say to my clients over and over again is that the kindest thing you can be is clear. And so we're making it exceptionally clear by the click point is always when it's in my hand.
And I have a question, and I may have my own answer for me, but I want to ask it. It would seem to me that because you're asking for very quick, pick it up and release it to you, there's not a lot of time for them to develop bad habits. But if you begin to see chewing or other unwanted little side effects to picking something up, do you just avoid reinforcing that? Do you reset? How do you avoid that, or how do you prevent that from happening, or how do you keep it from getting worse if it happens?
Yeah, so because I do behavior work with really intense dogs, like arousal is the thing we talk about ad nauseum. There is a whole bunch of it in the retrieve class because I can't not. And I have because of certain people in the room, I have a really clear system for handling errors. He's the kind of dog who gets really, really upset if he does something and I don't mark for it. He's like, how dare you? I put in effort. My God. But he also really understands our little learning system that we have. So I can show you what that looks like.
Sure.
So he always, when I'm teaching something new, he always starts on a platform, and I'm just going to make sure that he's ready to go. And I can see that because one, he's on his platform. He's not trying to jump off and come over and say hi. I can look at his face. I just know him well enough to look and be like, hey, you're not a certain shade of pink that some duck toolers turn when they're overwhelmed. I could ask him a really simple behavior. Good job. And then I can ask him to come off. Pick. Lie down. Good job. Go back. Now, I send him back in between every little tiny set of training. I tend to work in like 30-second bursts.
Okay.
Because that's sort of just standard, he always knows he's going to go wait there. And then I can, if I need to rearrange stuff or change something, I can do that. I've got a second to think. If he does something that I was not expecting, now I'm not trying to fix it when he's out here. When he does make a mistake, I can just go, oh, okay, that was weird, and pop him back. And it's not a big aversive event because that's just what happens constantly. It's background noise. And then I have a chance to fix it myself without trying to kind of mess with him too much. Right? Release. Good job, baby.
That's great. That's really, really interesting. So when do you know that a dog is ready to start going out and bringing it to you? I mean, clearly that's later in the training, but what are you looking for that says, okay, my dog is now ready for a short retrieve or a couple feet retrieve, or how close do you start, and how quickly do you build that up?
Well, I think I learned, I learned a lot about training from taking classes with Hannah Brannigan. And so I try I don't think I will ever succeed in being Hannah Brannigan, but I try to be a microsplitter. And so there are a ton of baby steps, and I just try to do like a foot at a time kind of thing. So I teach the whole part of sitting and waiting for something to be thrown, fully separate from the retrieve, so that we can scaffold those behaviors together. And once they're doing, they can go out and come back and go out and come back a few times without having to sit and wait, and they can sit and wait separately, then I'll bring those two things together. And I start really small. Like I just started my younger dog on retrieves. I held off for recording until we were recording for class. So I got to teach him the whole thing. And the first time he did them outside, I was putting them down literally right in front of his feet and asking him to pick them up. And then, can you do that? Cool. And then, can you sit while I throw a cookie for you and then run and get the cookie and come back? Cool. Now, what if I place that toy 2 feet away? Can you get that and come back? So tiny little baby questions, just checking. Hey, can you do this? Yes. Okay. Now, can you do the next thing?
I love the fact that you talk about micro splitting or going into those small little approximations. I often find that to be such a helpful tool in almost anything you train. I find that as a trainer, it's easy for us to get eager to get to the final result, and we often take way too big of a step. We want to get to that longer distance too quickly. And I love the fact that you're just starting with just putting it down and picking it up and putting it a foot away and breaking it up and bringing it back and making those little approximations really, really really strong and understandable to the dog. I think that's terrific. What is the in a real world setting, what is the longest distance you've ever had to have a retrieve take place? I mean, I just don't have any concept of, are we talking hundreds of yards? Are we talking just hundreds of feet? Or give me some idea.
Yeah, I mean, I'm often training alone, and so I'm fairly limited by my poor throwing skills. But when I do have access to a helper or sort of an automatic launcher, he will happily do 200 yards.
Wow, that's excellent. 200 yards is a really good distance for a retrieve. I think that's remarkable. before we take the next break, I just want to make sure that we've had an opportunity to see Biscuit do anything else that you wanted to demonstrate to us, because we're going to be taking some questions after the next break. And I just wanted to see if there was anything else that you thought would be helpful for us to see a step in the process with Biscuit, or it's your call.
Totally. I've got a million retrieve items. If anyone has something specific they'd like to see.
Oh yeah, let's show
Here.
us some of your retrieve items and talk about and which of the ones are the more challenging ones and which are the easier ones.
Yeah. Hi. So there's kind of two factors that come into difficulty. The first one is just like the physicality of the item. So is it a material that's really, you're gonna cry? It's just so sad because I'm gonna give you your docket. As you can see, also the arousal and the excitement of certain items is also really hard. Things like keys are going to be really challenging because it's a really small item and it's metal. So dogs don't really like putting metal in their mouth. They don't like the taste. Something like this is also going to be really challenging. This is what we call a dockin. It's a purpose-made rubber retrieve item. It's got the little flappy head and it's designed to look like a duck. I also have, they come all the way up to Canada Goose size, which this one's very exciting for Biscuit. Yeah, I know. I'm not going to give you this one. And these ones are really cool because you can inject odor into them as well, so they will smell like actual dead game. Most traditionally, we are training with something like this, which is a bumper. These comes in various sizes. These ones are obviously waterproof. They're rubber. They will float as well. And you can also fill them with water to make them heavier or lighter. Biscuit, though, Biscuit has lumbar sacral disease, so I'm often not asking him to pick up things that are really heavy. So he's often working with these little guys. And I've also been doing a lot of work with these little bite sport tuggies that are often used for like little puppies or just like in someone's training vest. In the EU and the UK, you can get much cooler retrieve items than we can get here. But these are a really good swap. I also have, these are scented to smell like ducks. And he really likes to search for these as well. And when he's doing a lot of multiples and I think he might tire himself out, I'm gonna go with these as well. But do you want to see, let's see a full, do you want to do the whole thing? Yeah.
Can I ask you a question about something you just said? When you're out in the field, are you depending on the dog to have seen where the item fell, or are they relying on their scent to be able to find it?
So that entirely depends on what we're teaching. So when we talk about marked retrieves, that's where the dog sees the fall. And then we've got blind retrieve where they're not seeing something fall at all. And that's where we're asking them to run in a direct line. I also do something which is a game that my good friend and our TA for the retrieve class, Annie, came up with, which is a game where they just sort of search, kind of almost nosework style, for little tuggies or balls in really tall grass, and they don't see those ones at all. And so we're letting them independently hunt on their own. And then when they find them, they pick them up and bring them back. So really the kind of world is your oyster. You're limited by your imagination for sure.
Well, I feel bad for asking the question because I feel like Biscuit's like ready to go. So I'm gonna quit talking and let you show us what you were just demonstrating.
He's very clear about what he'd like all the time. That's where I'm on a bumper. Okay. He will bring you into a friend. He will also go on. Wow. You ready? Oh. Biscuits. And one of the things that lowers arousal is chewing and eating. Just gonna ask him to eat a few times just to get a little excited. Sit. Mark. Biscuit. Biscuit. Oh.
Love that. I would imagine for some people that work on retrieving, getting their dog to go chase after an object is not the hard part. It's the
It's the
waiting till you,
everything that happens afterwards. Yeah.
but also it's the waiting to go out for it. And how do you teach the wait part of the toy went out, but you don't want him to go until you cue it? How do you work on that wait?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, million tricks in my book, but I start with food because I have more control over food, and then I don't have conflict. So if they have a toy, I have to get it back from them. And if they have really big feelings about having their toys, that can be a problem. So that might look like sit. Starting very simple. I'm just going to send him after a piece of food. And they understand the concept of stillness buys them access to getting to run and be explosive and fast and get that retrieve item. That's when they start to get really still. So you saw him freeze when he kind of get, and he'd be like, oh, no, I'm supposed to be still. All right, I'm supposed to sit, right? Because he knows, oh, hey, that's what gets access.
Love that. Love that. Love that. That's great. I'm seeing a lot of questions and things come in. So what I like to do is let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back with Juliana, and we'll see what kinds of questions our viewers have, as well as questions that Juliana and I might have that we'll ask you then. So Liza, we'll be back in about 1 minute. Okay. And what I thought I'd talk about next is I'm always excited when Clicker Expo season is rolling around, and Clicker Expo conferences are kind of where trainers go to learn what's next, from practical techniques to cutting edge insights in animal behavior science. Join us virtually in January or in person in March. In Westchester County, New York. Early bird savings are still available, but you need to register soon. And you can learn more about Clicker Expo at clickertraining.com, and then click on the Clicker Expo tab, and you'll learn all about both our virtual and our in-person event in New York coming up. Really excited about our lineup of speakers this year, and I think it's going to be, both conferences are going to be fun. And we encourage people to come to both because the programs are totally different. So I hope to see you at one or both of our Clicker Expos in 2026. All right, let's come back on the screen and let's talk to Liza. I love the information you shared. I'm going to ask Juliana to join us as well, because I think Juliana often has great questions, and I also think we have quite a few questions that have come in. And so why don't I let you start, Juliana, and either ask one of your own questions or bring one in from our viewers.
Yeah, that was really cool to watch. Thank you for demonstrating each step and breaking it down. I have a clarifying question about the process, the very, very first step where you are basically shaping, touching mouth to object. You are creating the drop by marking the behavior and feeding, or are you eventually waiting for a drop? That step of like delivered to my hand always confuses me, because are my hands going to you? Are you bringing it to my hands? Am I waiting for me to feel the pressure of the toy in my hands? Am I just taking it from you? In that early stage, are you getting the drop with the mark?
So if I'm not getting them actively switching to food on cue, then we've made errors. Like something's a problem. So this is a really common thing that when I have dogs who have have a retrieve breakdown and come in for behavior work, one of the things that I see when I go back and look at the earlier training videos is that there is a pause. Sometimes it's just like a microsecond between mark and going to access food. And so this moment of they're like, fine, right? And what I want is for them to take the cue, because a clicker is just a cue to access reinforcement, right? Whatever that cue is, I need them to move with the same fluency as I would want them to move with any other cue. And if I'm not getting that, then that's a training error on my part, and I need to go back and fix it. Now, I'm not totally sure how I got this with Biscuit, but Biscuit actually doesn't drop after a click until I take it from him. We're going to see if I can get it again with Hutch, who's my puppy. We'll find out. That's just Biscuit being Biscuit. He fills in the gaps a lot. He's kind of not a fair dog to have as a KPA dog because he just sort of does things for me. It's really nice of him. But what we really want to see is that they know how to access reinforcement on cue, and they're readily doing it. They're choosing to do it immediately.
That actually brings up a question that somebody just asked. What would you do for a dog that is way more toy motivated than food motivated, which is what you were just talking about, but also with teaching weight?
Yeah. So whenever we have, this is like behavior consultant hat coming on. If I ever have someone who's going like, they're not super food motivated, my immediate question is why? I work with a ton of pointers. I basically run an eating disorder clinic at this point. None of them eat. There is, by and large, usually pain, GI issues, or somewhere food has become compulsive. And it's often when we're trying to elicit attention from them with food. So the food becomes almost a barrier to access the environment and access cool stuff. If they're not food motivated, then we have that's another training problem. So let's go and figure out why. And we'll sort that out and then come back. I teach them everything first with food because, again, I have control over it and it goes away. And then once they've figured that out, then I bring in toys. So then I teach the same process of teaching them that steadiness, waiting for the cue to be released with a toy after they've learned it on food, because it's always easier to generalize.
And that brings up another similar question that someone asked, and this is the initial stages of teaching the actual retrieve. Can you reinforce those initial steps with another toy instead of food? I'm thinking of a few dogs who won't take food when toys are around. This theme is like this thinking that some dogs will always kind of choose toys over food.
Yeah. And that's certainly like, there are moments when I can give Biscuit, incredibly expensive, medium rare steak in the field. He will always eat it. Might not reinforce absolutely anything. He will always take access to more retrieving. But if they can't take food when toys are around, that's an arousal issue. That's a clarity issue. And that's a problem. I have a whole webinar that I have on toy session that talks a lot about this. That is a behavior problem that needs to be treated before we're asking them to retrieve toys. So actually the first whole week of retrieve class, we're not doing any retrieving because I need to make sure that they're willing to share their stuff and eat food and be chill. Because it's not fair to ask them to give something up that's so valuable.
You know what? You just mentioned, Liza, the retrieve class, and you are going to be offering a retrieval course through KPA Live. It's coming up soon. In fact, I think all of your working dog spots have already sold out, but we do have a lot of really excellent observer spots that are available. Are the things that you're talking about today the kinds of things that will be covered in that class?
Totally. I just, again, because I'm a behavior consultant first, we go into a ton of problem prevention and problem solving. We talk a lot about noticing when our dogs are having too big feelings to sort of be asked to do what we're asking them to do, how to help them modulate their big feelings if they do kind of get a little overwhelmed, as well as just making sure we're not asking them to do something that's not fair at every single step of the way.
And the class that you're teaching for KPA is not focused just on gun dog retrieving or obedience retrieving. It's all of the different versions of retrieving are applicable to people who might be interested in this class, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. It is the core retrieving skill, and then all of the background information that comes around that, and all the little stuff that we're going to scaffold into it.
Sure, excellent. Okay, I love the questions that some of the guests are asking. So, Juliana, back to you. And what other questions do we have out there?
Yeah, we have a few people asking questions about when their dogs are actually out in the field. I'm going to share one that's specific, but then maybe you can talk about how to handle issues when they're out in the environment. So Kim asks, any suggestions for a dog that does a beautiful, difficult retrieve in the field, then stops about 20 feet away out of all the cover, pauses, and drops the bird? He's great with easy retrieves.
So there are two really common behavior problems that come up with retrieving in the field that are just my favorite things to work with. This is one of them. The other one is where they get halfway out and stop and sniff. Great fun. The first thing that I'm going to think of is, are we sore? And behavior consultant, that's always the first question I ask. Are we sore? Just because we can do really complicated things and work really, really hard does not mean we're not sore. What happens after they bring it back? Right. So reinforcement needs to be equal to the effort put in. And so if we're getting a cookie for an easy retrieve and we're getting a cookie again, that's rough, right? What happens after? Sometimes, like with Biscuit, I will toggle him back and forth between retrieves that are much lower arousal where he really has to think and problem solve, and then letting him do a really easy, fast marked retrieve so that he's not getting burnt out on having to work really hard. So obviously all of these questions are just like, it depends, but there's either like a physical issue, we're getting tired, we're getting sore, something is going on. It might be a reinforcement issue. It also might be a guarding issue.
So interesting. All incredible considerations.
And as you're looking for the next question, Juliana, I thought maybe we could show the video of the dropped retrieve. I think Liza, you're in a store or something, and you dropped something, and I think it helps those that might be thinking about working in the field, seeing a retrieve in a much different setting. It might help people realize the variety of ways a retrieval can be used. So let's just show that video, and then we'll come back and see if there are other questions and talk about some of those kinds of things. I love that. It's just a very, very simple thing. Now, it's interesting. The thing that I noticed about it is as soon as you dropped it, Biscuit didn't wait for you to tell him to get it. He just started going toward it. He didn't actually pick it up until you cued it. But I was curious if there's a difference in an item like in a retrieval like that than when you're out in the field, and how you differentiate those things.
It is all just cueing. It's just, again, this is the basics done well thing. So he has learned that a dropped item is a cue. Mm-hmm. So if I drop something, I actually had a moment the other day. So my younger dog does not know how to do this yet. I had a moment the other day where I was out walking him in a field and I dropped my sunglasses and then just like patiently stood for a minute and then was like, oh, I have to pick them up. Oh. I'm just used to like every time I drop something, which is really helpful for me. I have ADHD. I drop things. I get overwhelmed very easily with like how many things I'm always having to carry. And then if I drop them, it's just like the end of the world. And then there's just a little sweetheart dog who picks them up and is so helpful. He'll just carry it to the car for me. Bless his heart. One thing that I kind of tell my clients all the time who are trying to find stuff to do with their dogs is you don't need to have a working service dog to teach service dog tasks. Mm-hmm. Like you're going to do training, it might as well be helpful. So I teach my dog service dog tasks all the time because they might as well help me out.
And do you find there's that you have to work hard to help teach unusual items, like you talked about metal items, like if you dropped your keys, it just wouldn't come as easily to a dog who's only ever had to retrieve a toy or something like that. Do you actually have to spend the time teaching a variety of items so that they get used to the various textures and things that they might feel in their mouth?
Totally. And I teach every item that I'm expecting a dog to pick up. I teach it the same method. So I start with, hey, you're going to put your mouse on this thing, and then we're going to lower it. And it just gets faster every time. So Biscuit now I go like, hey, you're going to hold this thing. He's like, cool. And I put it on the ground. He goes, here. Like we've done this for 7 years. He's got it. But each one we go, hey, this is a retrieve item.
You don't automatically assume that although he's learned to retrieve, that he will automatically understand to retrieve every item unless he shows you that he's able to.
Exactly.
Correct?
And that's also really helpful for me because there's things where I go like, no, you can keep that, right? So it's really important to me that the things that are retrieve items, my wallet, a bumper, right? He gets them and he brings them immediately to me. But there's also times when I would you can keep that thing. So balls, I don't ask him to bring me back balls. He can do whatever he wants with the ball. And that shape, he knows, like, you can go lay down and chew on it and run around, go, do stud dog stuff up and down the tree line. And then whenever you're ready, you can come back. But a bumper needs to come back right away. As soon as he's off course, I'm recalling him.
That's excellent. Juliana, do we have other questions? We have probably time for at least maybe 2 more.
Yeah. Clemmy Jones asks, and I think this speaks to seeing errors pop up in the process and how you would handle that. If they are chomping on the water bottle, so this is to when you're trying to get a quiet, soft hold. If they're chomping on the water bottle when you're looking for a quiet hold, do you try to mark and reinforce a quiet moment, or do you reset the rep to get a mark in before any chomping starts?
Totally depends on the dog. Totally depends on the dog. There are dogs who are just going to be gutted if you take their thing away. You don't give them a cookie. And there are dogs like Biscuit who just need that clarity, right? Because if Biscuit chomped something and I just didn't click, he would just chomp harder. Like, that's just who he is as a person. And so for him, it's really helpful to just go like, oh, try again. Mm-hmm. There's also way more steps to this. So there's more than just handing them a thing and hoping that they do it well.
Right. It's that we don't want to hope that it goes well.
Yeah, exactly. If I'm having to be like, maybe,
like, well, let's see how this goes. Right. That's what you're
nothing good ever comes after. Let's see how this goes.
Right. Okay. Tess and I asks, in a directed retrieve, so I guess I think the blind retrieve, where you're sending the dog out and they did not see the bird fall, does the dog use his nose to find the object, or does he use his sight to find the object?
So really old school gun dog trainers who don't know a lot about dogs, like biologically, will tell you that they shouldn't use their nose at all. Of course they use their nose. They're dogs. Right. They're going to do it. I want them to find it as efficiently as possible. That's going to depend on what it is and what it looks like, right? So a white bumper in snow, they're going to be sniffing for it. A white bumper on, a mowed lawn, they're looking for it, right? They're going to see it. So when a directed retrieve, especially as we get more complicated, we're trying to send them as close to it as possible. When they're pretty much on top of it, they're trying to find it in that little small space that they've been sent to as quickly as possible. I don't really care how they do it.
That's good. All right. Excellent. Do you have one more quick question, do you think, Juliana?
So, somebody's asking about how they can get their Labrador Retrieve involved in gun dog training skills and having fun, but maybe without having to do any of the bird or the gun parts. If somebody's looking to get their dog involved in gun dog sport adjacent training, what would you recommend besides follow you on Instagram?
Yeah, you can totally come work with me. You should audit the class, first of all. Mm-hmm. And then all of the stuff can be trained without birds. Mm-hmm. I certainly have a freezer full of dead animals. I don't expect anybody else to. Training gun dog stuff can be a challenge because of access. So a lot of people don't have access to a club that is going to be okay with just doing stuff for fun, right? Or even, is less than a 4-hour drive away. But there's lots of options of how to train it. All of the things can be taught with a bumper or a ball if you wanted it to. The AKC Fetch program is super fun, but you can also just find inspiration from the environment that you are in and also from watching other trainers from around the world and just see what they're doing and play with it because it's supposed to be fun. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. What I'd like to do is I'm going to take a quick break, but I don't want you to leave. I just want to wrap things up with you right after the break because you were just talking about your class that you're going to be teaching for KPA. I just want to tell everybody a little bit about our KPA live courses, if I could. In fact, if you check out our upcoming KPA Live virtual classes, they meet weekly on Zoom and include video-based curriculum and online discussion group. You can also participate in an on-demand format with access to the recordings and materials for an entire year. You can learn more about the courses. You can see Game of Throws, Functional Fluent, and Fun Retrieves, which Liza is teaching. Later in the year, I'll be teaching one on snake avoidance training. So go to KarenPryerAcademy.com and look up our live classes, and you'll find out more about that. And so having said that, Liza, I think I can tell by the interest and the number of questions that people are asking that I think this is going to be a fascinating class. And I think the first time someone says, hey, do you want to take a retrieval class? If you're not really familiar with retrieval, it can seem like, well, that's simple. Why would I take a class on that? But I think you've really demonstrated, and the questions have demonstrated, the wide variety of reasons why I think a class could be really, really beneficial. And for me, I love this episode just because we've talked about a lot of things that I've not talked about before. And it really opened my eyes to some really cool aspects to training that I think, for me as a training geek, I just kind of love. So I really appreciate you being with us on the broadcast today, and hopefully we can have you come back again in the future, and I wish you lots of luck with that particular class. So Liza, thank you for being on Live from the Ranch, and hopefully we'll see you in the not too distant future. I'm going to maybe pop in on one of your classes when that starts up in next month.
Excellent. All right, yeah, we'd love to see you in class, and come on and ask me more questions. You can always email me, send me an Instagram DM or something, because been nerding out about this for years. It's my favorite thing to talk about.
I love it. Yeah, it's clear that you really are passionate about it, but it's also clear that you have a lot of really good knowledge. And I really appreciate you sharing that with all of our viewers today. So thank you very much. And just a couple things I want to tell everybody about next month's broadcast. Next month, we have another wonderful broadcast planned. My guest will be Dr. Vali Parthasarathi, and they're going to be talking about stationing and working with multiple animals. I think it could be a very, very fascinating topic, and I'm really looking forward to that conversation. And we just want to remind you that if you have ideas for us, videos for us, questions for us, you can reach out to us on the website. Go to the Ranch website, and there's a place there where you can share your comments and suggestions and training videos. Submit those. We always love hearing suggestions and ideas for future broadcasts. So please do that. And don't forget to check out all of the other special offers that we talked about throughout the broadcast. Our September's back to school sale, Clicker Expo. Don't miss out on an opportunity to get some early bird savings, and look at our KPA Live virtual classes. We always have wonderful, very knowledgeable instructors teaching those classes. Liza is a great example of one of those people who will be teaching a class for us very, very soon. So I really appreciate all of you being here. It's been a great conversation. Thank you, Juliana, for joining us as well and being such a great host. And I will see you all next month. Happy training. Bye-bye.